We continue the yoga of thinking, exploring reading. Reading is thinking done in us, thinking done for us. We'll see. So, we can now feel thinking as our body mind stringing along series of words that we hear in our inner ear. And other people can similarly cause series of words to string themselves together in our minds by way of clan developed and approved sounds we call spoken words. And only a few thousand years ago, elites learned to cause words to string themselves together in our minds by way of clan developed and clan approved squiggles on papyrus or some other medium we call written words. Written words are squiggles. Written words trigger our body minds to think words another person has previously thought. It was a dark and stormy night. Well, it probably was neither dark nor stormy, and really, nobody did nothing. An author imagined something. The author's inner speech automaton generated sentences depicting experiences and wrote it down, copied the squiggles. And her imaginings now appear in your mind. You hear in your mind what he or she heard in his or her mind. As with most dialogic story or screen interactions, we almost instantaneously get absorbed into a story or series of descriptions. And like when we try to remain aware of participating in everyday dialogue, our dialogic thinking yoga, we couldn't do it. Reading. Without any will or awareness, you suddenly enter a dimension of lived experience that is unique and profoundly different from most other mental states. It's like stepping into a world that at first is ostensibly constructed of words and letters, ink on paper, squiggles on screens. But individual letters or words are not really seen as individual things at all. We don't even recognize them as they speed past our mind's eye. A parallel to this is the experience of spoken word worlds we inhabit. Phonetics. We can't attend to syllables, phonemes, syntax, grammar, etc., the constituent parts of the written word world. We experience chunks of meaning, stories, pictures, dialogues in our mind's ear behind the pronunciation, semantics, and syntax. And likewise, our eyes constitute objects, people, places from blobs of color, direction, movement, contrast, outline. We see wholes that are much greater than the sum of the constituent parts. But what does happen as soon as I put on my magical reading cloak is I'm instantaneously thrust through a portal to an experience of a story starts to go through my head. Reading. While reading, I enter into a world not exactly of words, because I am not aware of individual words, but of ideas, of whole sentences, of word pictures that are not parts of speech, but more like chunks of ideas that feel like chunks of lived experience, actually. Reading takes me to a place I learned to inhabit when I was 7 or 8 as I learned to read. A place which is very comfortable and very alluring. Almost immediately, I am oblivious to my body, almost oblivious to most all of my extraneous thoughts and usual word streams. Often enough, even if I have some nagging, painful bodily difficulty, it too relents for much of the time I'm lost in my novel. I draw attention to how, in a certain way, this is an experience akin to being hypnotized. Attention is massively narrowed, and outside stimuli, outside the constrained focus, becomes completely unperceived, virtually invisible. Somewhat akin to dreaming, also. Like dreaming, reading feels like I'm partaking in lived experiences with people and places that just appear in my mind. And the usual conscious self is absent. Can you remember this loss of consciousness when story reading has taken over? It's hard to be aware of a loss of consciousness that has become perfectly habitual. It's a strange state, isn't it? I'm here, going through my everyday life. Then I'm struggling through Mordor with Frodo and Sam. And if completely into the story, it's hard to say exactly where I am, where myself is. There I am. You can see me reading right over there, but I'm not there. And when I stop, look up, check what's happening around me, it's analogous to waking up from a dream and remembering parts of the fantasy dream experience. The hypnotic spell is broken. And it's strange that it doesn't feel strange, but usual and comfortable. We've been learning to attend to the thoughts that arise in our mind's ear. We've been finding it extremely difficult to be aware of everyday thoughts. Only very intermittently and with difficulty becoming aware of what those thoughts are and how they are connected, unconnected. Analogously, we are almost never aware of the thoughts that run through our minds when we read. And we are almost never aware of thoughts that go through our minds when we watch screens. All these species of thinking induce an unaware state of a certain kind. They're psychic states that happen in us, but states that we can't pay attention to as they happen. I may have been in Mordor or Narnia for 2 or 3 hours, but I've also been in this chair for those 2 or 3 hours without being conscious of sitting relatively still and quiet. Strange, no? Here's a minute of me reading. Watch my eyes, my posture, but also think about what's going through my head, what I'm thinking about. Video yourself reading something. At first, you may feel a tad awkward, but reading will soon take you over. Now on playback, watch your eyes and see your body. Think about what's going through your noggin. Your mind kind of dreams the story, adventure, fictional experiences, while your body just sits there, strangely quiet and inert, eyes tracking. Everything is in your head, isn't it? As you watch yourself, everything is in your head. As you observe yourself, you're watching the reading automaton take you over and use you. You're watching words go through your mind's ear, but now watching yourself, you don't hear those words. Things we are usually not aware of when we read fiction, but which we can be aware of via the yoga of experiencing. Almost immediately, I am oblivious to my body, almost oblivious to all my extraneous thoughts and usual word streams, oblivious to most nagging anxieties, oblivious to how my eyes are working really hard. It feels like I see people, places, and things, though I only see words on paper, of course. People, places, and things that I'm experiencing via reading have no objective existence. And I seem to partake of adventures of every variety that never took place. In many ways, while I'm reading, I'm egoless, because in a certain sense, I'm not even present. Like when I have a dream, things happen to me, though in a way, I'm not aware of myself except as a vague background, almost invisible bystander, listener, observer. Later, when I stop reading, it feels like I come back to my real life with all its attendant complexities. Analogously, in many ways, when I'm thinking, I'm egoless. I'm not aware of what I'm thinking. Words, phrases, sentence fragments go through my head and are forgotten. Loops of words, driven by feeling, repeat and repeat and then repeat again. This happens to or in me. I don't have to attend to words for them to happen in me. Think about this. It's more interesting than it appears on the surface. While reading, I live an experience that the author created for me, which is not accompanied by perceptual cues that take me along. Reading someone else's words fills my head for long periods with chunks of ideas, story sentences, manufactured verbal scenes and descriptions. These magical verbal tokens magically give me somewhat the same senses of reality that face-to-face conversations and encounters also give me. But descriptions are not places. Words can't be persons or things. But the story people and story dialogues and story adventures feel very much like reality, like real people, places, and things. Story people feel like they possess inner lives, like they make fateful choices, generate intentions, think and feel. Well, maybe somewhat less than actual people, but how much less? Word processing primates. We are a culture of word processing primates. What happens when I read a book? We're going to try and attend to the experience in a new way. First, I'm going to induce a story in you by reading to you. That's an interesting way to put it. I'm going to induce a story in you. Come sit with me for a while. If we had a roaring fire in a huge brick fireplace, that would be perfect. Maybe a scrumptious old-fashioned for each of us, and a faithful dog between us. For me, old school, scribbles on paper. This time, you'll receive my story through your ears. This particular time, attempt to sense yourself in the experience, staying partially awake to the larger context. Please listen to the next paragraphs with me. The young girl stumbles through the cold November twilight, sobs muffled by the wind, tears and sleety rain streaming down her puffy face. Her chest aches from racking sobs. Her stomach is clenched fist tight as if to hide the filthy secret hidden inside her. Crescendo of jumbled, mad voices lashing her mind, feelings twisted tighter. Pregnant, pregnant, pregnant. Bawling, accusing, terrified voices, even the witch's vindictiveness, the figment, ghost, crystallizing fragment, is gilded in fear. Night is so much worse than day. She'd suffered through the endless hours of daytime while they battled, accused, leaded catastrophe. The thick mists that had settled in her mind distorted what little she could still see and understand at school. Having to look, having to answer, no place to hide. In the darkness, though, what was left of mind is battered by tsunamis of raw fear. Now she's visited by hallucinatory demons spawned in her hell-bound soul. The wraiths berate and threaten to destroy her, gloating over the coming cataclysm. In the confusion, people still call Melissa. There is the knowledge that others are watching her, becoming concerned. Take a moment. Attend to your inner experience. This intense story took you over at some point, didn't it? It automatically and almost immediately transported you to a place of darkness, walking with a vulnerable girl. The story is of trauma. What just happened? How do you feel? Hearing story words induced many experiences in you, yes? Now I'm going to put the same paragraphs on the screen for you to read. Please read Melissa's story for yourself. Hear the words in your inner ear. Pay attention to yourself as you read. Let's start. Stop now. Do you remember the first day when I spoke the word boy and asked you to hear it in your mind's ear? Then I presented the word boy on your screen, and you also heard that word in your mind. Now, listening to me reading, did you experience the words the author had previously thought and written down in your mind? And finally, again, you heard those words in your mind via your highly developed reading automaton, the same words and somewhat the same experience, many of the same emotions via two completely different media. The experience of reading. Children are indoctrinated, absorbed into story simultaneously with learning to speak and think. Words that tell stories become invisible. That is, the words construct a mental space experience that feels like real life, real experiencing. But sequential verbal equivalents and linked verbal descriptions are not existence or real experiences. They are linked tokens and schemes of language. But when the automaton becomes perfected, the word processing primate soon chooses to live in the lands created by wordsmiths of every kind. Live in worlds cobbled together by the usual purveyors of fiction, but also live in all or any of the world's trove of stored literary imaginings. And what is often missed is that the world's trove of scientific storyfying, anthropology, history, geology, earth sciences, psychology, etc., are also word tokened imaginings. Science, history, philosophy, religion elaborate mind places by way of word tokened imaginings also. We sometimes miss this. We, each of us, learn the same implanted knowledges, stories of history and science, religion and philosophy via written, spoken story tokens. This is where it all comes from. Reading. Let's suppose you've picked up one of the Lord of the Rings books to reread. Who is Frodo? Where is Frodo? Frodo doesn't have a self, an I, does he? Middle-earth is a well-crafted, evocative series of words and descriptions, but non-existent. The action-packed events that make up the trilogy never happened. Yes? Why did millions, maybe billions, spend 15 to 30 hours of their lives reading this work? Did you feel a lot while perusing this work of fiction? Can you thrill to the sensational finale with Frodo struggling with Gollum, half toppling into the lava river of Mount Doom? Mark Twain asked provocatively, what's so interesting about what never happened? This is a very important question. What's so interesting about what never happened? While reading, hearing story, I go away. My usual experiencing self is replaced by a word-induced imagination experience. I, body awareness, personal thoughts, time-place awareness, is replaced by a magical an imaginary world substitute. Mind experiencing, word processing par excellence. Very important to our species-wide addiction to this manufactured experience is how reading story, fiction, conveys, instigates every kind of feeling. Mordor is fraught, is it not? Remember when Shelob first slithers into view? We vicariously experience story character feelings. We vicariously feel all the situations the story projects, and we identify with, love some characters, and may well loathe, hate, and fear others. We crave cop shows, crime shows, adventure and superhero shows, rom-coms, horror shows, and many other types. We crave the jolts of feeling that titillate our nervous systems time after time. We have universe-spanning, dangerous, almost lethal adventures, and all the attendant feelings from the safety of our comfy couches. Listen to this sentence. First, focus attention on your body. Let yourself be centered. Quieten your mind a bit. Close your eyes. Let your thoughts subside if you can. The young girl stumbles through the cold November twilight, sobs muffled by the wind, tears and sleety rain streaming down her puffy face. Feel where the sentence is. The young girl stumbles through the cold November twilight, sobs muffled by the wind, tears and sleety rain streaming down her puffy face. Feel the words elaborate a picture scene that we can experience as very real, yet nowhere. Feel the feelings just about every second word engenders. In no time, we can be feeling the emotional trauma of a pregnant, very young girl falling into a nervous breakdown. At the same time, could you at all feel yourself observing, even as you listened? Let's do this again. This time, try and keep your attention on your body-mind, even as you listen to the story. The young girl stumbles through the cold November twilight, sobs muffled by the wind, tears and sleety rain streaming down her puffy face. Could you do it? Keep some part of the observer above the experience of story? Or did you fall completely into the sentence and have it possess you? And sometimes we can do it for some seconds, but most of the time, in the blink of an eye, we're right lost in the story as it goes through our noggins. In general, I suggest you can't. Just like you can't be aware, attend to individual letters or individual words and read properly, you can't lose yourself in reading and stay awake to yourself at the same time. And when we're more aware, when we don't fall into the story, it's no fun, is it? You can't read Tolkien or Tolstoy awake. That is, feeling that you're reading, aware that you've been reading. You can't observe, pay attention to the reading automaton as it works and enter Storyland. Curious, no? Children are inducted into Storyland almost from when language is introjected into them. They learn to project personhood, individuality, mind, agency, morality into fictional characters. And they learn to love, crave the feelings fiction induces. We lose ourselves in reading. Screens are certainly replacing reading, writing as the overwhelming purveyor of Storyland, yet the experience is largely congruent. And we do it for the same reasons. We'll see this in the next yoga. I invite you to experiment with your own reading automaton. Try and be aware of the process of reading as you begin some fictional extravaganza. Pay attention to words on screen, words materializing in your mind. See how long your awareness lasts. Also read nonfiction. Feel the difference. Feel the sameness, the loss of consciousness. Do this on your own. Start now.